I want to talk to you today about a couple of different things, but I want to start with this, which is, okay, so the Blue Jays are at the break, the unofficial midway point, and I know it's later, blah, 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 blah. It's the All-Star break. They've got essentially the exact same record as they had a year ago. You look at things, they're back in a wild card position. They're not the Seattle Mariners, right, where you get labeled as the most disappointing team in baseball. They've had some up and downs, but ultimately this season, despite them sitting exactly where they were a year ago, I guess maybe the argument is that there isn't progress. It feels like it just hasn't been a very positive feeling here in Toronto watching this baseball team. I wonder, just from your vantage point, what do you think is the most surprising thing for you about the Jays as it stands today?
That's a good question, JD, because I do think this team has some aspects that have actually been positive on the upside in terms of some of the underlying aspects of the performance and the way they're trending. But I also think that probably the biggest difference, if we're looking at it right now, is that they have got to deal with a really strong Baltimore team in their division and a really strong Tampa team. And so that's where we talk about their record may be the same or about the same as it was a year ago on this exact date, but the circumstances are different. And I think it's also different that certainly Manoah came back. He had one good start against the Tigers, and we're left to contemplate now during the break, was that evidence that he's all the way back? Was that evidence that he faced a relatively weak lineup and pitched well against them? I do think it was a really good step for him and a huge confidence booster and a great way for the Jays overall to enter the break. I mean, you get no hit on Saturday, but Friday you get Manoah, and then Sunday you get a comeback win that showed a lot of character. So it's still a team that has, in my view, a lot of upside. And you look at their lineup and how many sort of star-level performers they actually have, and you know, guys that are in the All-Star game but not really having MVP-like seasons. They actually, when you look at this ball club, they actually are in some ways fortunate to be in as good of a position as they are. And when you look around at the other teams that have been in the wild card mix right now, well, the Yankees just fired their hitting coach. The Angels are in a free fall. The Mariners haven't really been able to put it together. So you look around and say, for all the Jays' faults and inconsistencies, you actually have to like their chances to find a way to get back to the postseason. So my overall assessment is unfulfilling first half, inconsistent first half, underperforming in many ways, and yet I really like their chances to make something of this season and at the very least get to the playoffs here in 2023.
Yeah, it's weird because we all know in sports progress isn't linear, but at one, you're year 8 into Shapiro and Atkins, and you're hoping for more than playoff wild card games on the road, right? And playoff games, not to sound like old greedy Gus here, because Toronto wasn't exactly playoff baseball guarantee for most of my life. It's a recent development where they make the playoffs, but it's like making the final spot in a wild card when with the expanded playoffs. It doesn't have the same feeling as making the playoffs in even 2015 and 16, right? Like, it's just not. It's a bit of a different story.
Right.
And so to be in this same spot where you look at the team and go, okay, the record is the same, and you're right, there is reason to believe that they'll lock up that spot and that the team is good. Seeing the Orioles surpass you with their plans, seeing the Rays do it on a budget, just be this good, and feel like the team is not as special even as a year ago, that they're maybe around as good, but don't have some of the same things like Manoah being incredible. Yeah, I think it's been tougher for people to swallow. And so now you're looking at this and saying the other part is Toronto is all in, right? That's the real feeling is with Baltimore, everyone's so excited because you have all this room to operate. And with Tampa, I have no idea what their prospects are like, but they win every trade, so you feel like whatever they end up trying to do is actually going to work out for them. For Toronto, they won that game yesterday because of Nathan Lucas gets into a game. They had Ernie Clement in the game again, coming off the bench to pinch hit, who's pretty much like that's not supposed to be a thing for a contending team. And yeah, I think that one thing has become very, very clear, which is they need another right-handed bat. The question is, how far away are they from getting that done? Because Shapiro and Atkins have jumped the market before. This is a clear need for this baseball team. What's your read on them trying to add depth and how they're going to be able to accomplish something like that, given what they have with their farm system?
Right. No, I think that's an excellent point. This is now, again, I'm a little reluctant to pronounce too much about Manoah after one start, but at least there was a reassuring sign enough on Friday that I think Ross and Mark have now some license to focus more on the offensive side of the ball for the next couple weeks and see if they can produce the bat that they need. I think to your point, I for a long time I have thought that their primary need was on the left-handed side of the ledger, and I still think that they are in many ways a right-handed dominant lineup overall, top to bottom. But I think they have brought their balance by adding in Belt, Varsho, Kiermaier. They have become more left-handed, or at least left-handed enough to where if the best available option for them to augment their lineup is right-handed, then they can feel comfortable doing that. I think one of the ironies here, and I don't know how likely it is, but one of the ironies is, what if Seattle really falls off the pace here in the wild card? Would they consider trading Teoscar back for the final 2 months?
I brought this up last week.
The irony is,
I brought that up last week.
That's the kind of player that, right? That's the kind of player that they probably need. So it's a really ironic situation to be in. But I think to the big picture point that you made a moment ago, JD, I think you're exactly right, that this team, you have to look at the context of what they're trying to do, what they've been building toward. Their window to win the World Series with Vlad and Bo, quite literally, runs through the end of 2025. And if you take out that horizon to 5 years or 6 years, Jays fans won't want to hear this, but I feel better about the Baltimore Orioles having more opportunities to win the World Series in this decade from now until the end of it than the Jays have.
Yeah.
And the other piece is, how long can you reasonably expect the Yankees and or Red Sox to be mediocre or in the bottom of a very competitive American League East? It is. We've talked before about this. It is a statement of reality, mathematical certainty, that whenever the Jays are good, it corresponds with a diminishment in the standing of the Yankees or the Red Sox or both. And the one difficult part of this now is that the Yankees are, in some ways, they basically have the same record as the Jays, but in some ways they're just not the same team without a healthy Aaron Judge, and they've fired their hitting coach. And the Red Sox have been last in the division for a while and have a lot of inconsistencies as well. It really stings if you're the Blue Jays when you see the Yankees and Red Sox floundering a bit, and then you look up and say, wait a minute, I've got two really good teams in front of me who aren't the Red Sox and the Yankees. This division is just so difficult, and I think that's part of the reality of where the Jays are right now.
That's absolutely it. It's just, you want to feel like when there's down cycles with the Yankees and the Red Sox and that you have this special talent group that you built towards, that this was supposed to be your time, and seeing the others, because I think that it's fair to say that the Yankees and Sox, this is their division, and that you, the Orioles, and Tampa, that you're the third of the others during this time. It's not right. Anyway, so are there some names that you think Toronto would like to target when it comes to that bat? It's like the reason why I referenced the right-handed bat is that it's hard to imagine how they would fit in a DH type that isn't just purely like a pinch hitter and work Belt in too, right? Like having Belt, Vladdy, and then another lefty bat. You go, well, right, where do you fit? Where does this guy get in? But with the right-handed bat, is there a name or two other than Teoscar Hernandez that you're starting to circle and go, hey, this is someone that teams might be listening in on?
Yeah, so I think I would start to look initially at one team that is on the precipice of probably becoming a seller, and that's the Cubs. They have, I think, and again, we can talk about other possibilities. I do believe that Bellinger was someone that the Jays looked at different times, and he is likely to get traded, having a really good year. He can play the outfield. He can play certainly first base if you need him to. Obviously, the Jays are set there, but I think he is versatile enough that I would take a really good look at Bellinger and potentially move him around and see what different positions he could make an impact on for you. They are also someone that I think in general the Cubs have maybe that one extra reliever that you would want. If the Jays are going to add pitching, I think it's more of that swingman type who could fill in if Kikuchi needs a break, or if things don't go the right direction with Alec. The one thing the Jays do not have a ton of is ready-made AAA starting pitching depth, ready to impact. And I think that was made apparent by the inability to call up somebody to take Manoah's spot. They had to keep bullpenning things through. I think that, to me, is, I look at one of the Tigers All-Stars or the one Tigers All-Star, Michael Lorenzen, as someone who I think fits what the Jays potentially need. Obviously the bullpen needs are there, and I think every contending team needs another reliever. But I think Lorenzen has particular applicability because he's shown that he can be a starter. He's shown that he can be a reliever. He's a very versatile guy, good teammate, been traded before. Those kinds of boxes that you check that I think are helpful. But I think in general, again, the name that comes up to me, I know he's not right-handed, but Bellinger with the Cubs is a fit. Teoscar with Seattle is a fit. I think the Nationals, I mentioned on the Sportsnet TV side yesterday, Corey Dickerson, former Jay, I think he makes some sense. He's left-handed, obviously. Ildemaro Vargas, I think he makes a lot of sense, too. And I think Colorado's got some bats that they're a team. They're probably the one clear selling team right now in the NL West, depending on how things go with their group. I'm not going to say Chris Bryant. Obviously, he's more of an expensive guy that we would not expect to get moved. But are they ever to the point where they would consider moving a Ryan McMahon? Again, he's left-handed. Or old friend Randall Grichuk. He's another guy that I think could be available. These are some sort of more of the complementary pieces on a team like the Rockies and the Cubs, JD, that I would recommend Jays fans start to look at.
Yeah, well, frankly, again, because I mentioned Lucas, and good for Lucas. I don't want to steal from his moment. Good for him. And good for Ernie, Big Ern, as Ennis calls him. But those are not players that you want to have on a championship caliber team. So, yeah, they're going to need to add that depth. The question is, do you think that it's overstated? Because here we really do talk about the farm system and what Toronto has to offer other teams. Like, what's your read on how aggressive Toronto is going to pursue, big trades that are going to try to improve this team, and how limited are they going to be by what they have in the farm system?
Well, I think that to your point, the Jays, they traded in the last couple of years, and I think having Moreno now with the Diamondbacks certainly limits some of their ability to take a big swing at a major player right now, where it's more of an incremental addition. I do think that if you look at the numbers of Martinez in the minor leagues, he has been better since the beginning part of May. April for him was tough, but he's been better of late. There are, I think, a couple other young prospects. Schneider actually is played pretty well up to AAA now. He's a name to watch. They have had some pitching, I think, perform well more at the high A, AA level that I think has maybe given them some tradable depth. But certainly with Tiedemann being injured, it really does limit their ability to take a big swing. And this is, to be fair and to be direct, maybe more direct about it, I would not think that Jays fans should be getting their hopes up for, hey, if the Padres fall out, let's make a run at Juan Soto. I just don't think that's going to happen right now. Yeah. So I would sort of put that aside for now and focus more on the incremental bats that are shorter term control. Again, Jays fans might not want to hear a ton about my belief that Grichuk is a good fit to bring back someone that was there before, but that's probably the aisle that you're shopping in because just everything you've ever seen with Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins, how they build organizations, they typically do not go all in for rentals, especially not when they've done that or made significant trades in recent years that would limit their overall depth at this point in the evolution of the Jays farm system.
Yeah, I think that you would just make the case, though, if you were a fan. You would go, well, aren't these guys needing some playoff success to ensure jobs moving forward? And so doesn't that make you a little bit more aggressive with who you would try and pursue? Because I mentioned it's year 8, and I don't think that it's going to go over very well in the city if you end up playing wild card games on the road and, lose back-to-back. Right? Or, you have 2 seasons where you get into the wild card and you don't end up winning any of those games. Okay, so the good thing for them is that at least all of a sudden it does appear that they have starting pitching depth again after running a 4-man rotation and Chris Bassett potentially being a little nicked up and, just having to rely too heavily on those 4 arms. They finally hit the break. Manoah comes up. You mentioned it. He pitches extremely well on Friday, but it is the Detroit Tigers. Like, you take it with a bit of a grain of salt. But he looked good for a lot of that outing. This wasn't just what I maybe expected, which was 4 or 5, where he walked a few more guys. He looked good. Like, he looked like Alek Manoah.
Right.
And I wonder what's your read on the situation in terms of how the Jays feel about him moving forward here, how close they are to, having the real Alek Manoah back.
I think that for me, one of the more encouraging parts of his outing was how much he was in the strike zone. I think the number of walks that he had and just non-competitive pitches before he was sent down, that to me was the big alarm. And now he's just in the zone much more often. I really think that the Jays probably somewhat strategically had him pitch against a team in Detroit that is not one of the top lineups in the major leagues, and certainly Alek is aware of that, and I'm sure that's part of the context of the start. It's a good start against a relatively struggling lineup right now, and I think that is important context. I'm not sure that he's ready to go out and face the Yankees at Yankee Stadium and deal for 7 innings again, but I really believe the Jays look at it and were reassured enough that they can at least plan on him. I don't think they have to get the all-star version back of him. And I think one of the things that I would mention is that what's happened since last year, it's been a bit of a role reversal between Berrios and Manoah. And obviously Berrios was never sent down to the minor leagues last year, but he struggled at times. And I think that Alek, the expectations for him, it now is as sort of stunning as we think about a year ago on this date he was getting ready to pitch in the All-Star game, that the idea is just be good enough to be the 3rd or 4th starter, because you've got Gausman, you've got Berrios, you're really well situated there at the top. The expectation of what you need from him has evolved, and so as the bar for what you need out of him has dropped a little bit, I think the Jays feel increasingly optimistic that if the bar is lower, that he's going to be able to meet that bar, and that the rotation could be and should be actually, JD, a strength as they get to the second half of the season.
And then there's the Ryu part of this, right? He has the A start.
Right.
And he
exactly. And
Siddle's talking about 2 to 3 starts potentially away in the minors before they take a look at him with the Jays. How does he fit back in with the big league club? And is that sort of the timeline you're feeling too? 2 to 3 starts, a couple more weeks until we see Ryu?
Right, and it's a really good point. I mean, for me, there's probably I would expect that we could see Ryu make his return somewhere around the end part of July, and that's where, of course, the deadline being August the 1st, JD, you'll get information, and so by then you look at the calendar and think how many off days you get in July because of the All-Star break. And just the way in which off days can integrate into the schedule, they'll have information. They'll know by the end of July, I think, what they can expect out of Ryu. And also, they will have had another start or 2 out of Manoah to see how sustainable his stuff is. And really, JD, they need 2 out of 3, in my opinion, at least as long as the big 3 stay healthy. If you include Bassett there with Berrios and Gausman, then you need 2 out of 3, Ryu, Kikuchi, and Manoah, to be good, to be stable. And I think internally that's a reasonable enough. It's a calculated risk and assessment. But I think in general you're confident enough that you'll get reasonably steady performance out of two of those three, to where you can focus on offense or focus on the bullpen. Or honestly, if you're surprised and you get a little upside surprise and all three of them are throwing well, then one of them becomes a reliever and your bullpen's better. So it's a nice problem to have. And for all those reasons, JD, I think it's entirely possible that the Jays are comfortable riding things out with their current starting pitching depth and instead focus on a swingman pitcher or the bullpen, or more likely the lineup.
God, you'd love to see that. You'd love to see them be able to run a six-man rotation, even if, yes, you're right, you're not getting the Cy Young finisher in Manoah, or even that, I guess, same thing, top 3 Cy Young finisher in Hyun-Jin Ryu as well. Hey, we ran out of time, so we didn't get to talk about your Red Wings and the Yzer plan, but congrats. Alex DeBrincat, a local guy, comes home. That feels good. Signs for a nice little sweetheart deal. Good. Congrats. Detroit, maybe a little bit more back, a little bit more back on the hockey map. Jon Morosi gets to have more hockey conversations coming up here.
Yes. I can't wait. Those Leafs Wings games are going to be a lot of fun. The cat has come home. Yeah. I know the Wings are excited. The fans are excited here as well. So exciting times ahead, my friend. Can't wait to talk baseball and hockey next time.
Absolutely. Jon Morosi, MLB Network. Thanks for making the time.